My purpose in today's message is to more clearly define in your minds what true love really is and what it looks like in a person's life. As the video just indicated, and as I've touched on as well in one or either both of the preceding messages to today, is that with most people, the thought that they have is that from start to finish, love has to do with feelings. And even Webster's dictionary, and I brought the copy that I've had probably since college days, so this has been around for a while. Nowadays, you don't use it in book form, you just go online. But in looking in Webster's, it gives us a good idea of the way the word love is used in the English language. Remember, dictionaries aren't created for the purpose of telling you this is what you need to mean with the words that you use, but really dictionaries are just reflections of the way the word is used in a language. And so we look at the word love, and the number one definition for love in Webster's starts out like this: a deep and tender feeling of affection. Those are the very first words. This is the entire definition, the first definition of love in Webster's. It says, a deep and tender feeling of affection for or attachment to a person or persons. Now, it's got, 4, 5, 6 other definitions as well, but this is the primary one. Again, reflecting, this is the way the word in English is most commonly used. It's in reference to emotion. And as has already been pointed out, from start to finish, this is the way people look at this concept of love. They think of it as being a feelings-oriented sort of a thing. But biblically, when you start reading in the Bible, if that is the definition that you're working with all of the time, you're going to run into some snags. You're going to run into some things that are just like, what? This doesn't totally make sense. For example, let me show you a couple passages. One of them comes from the book of 1 John, chapter 4, verse 21. This actually will be the only reference I'm going to make today to 1 John. Both of the preceding messages, we spent quite a bit of time in 1 John chapter 3 and 1 John chapter 4 because the subject of love, agape love, is spoken of extensively in those two chapters. But here's the way it's worded. 1 John chapter 4, verse 21 says, the command that Christ has given us is this: whoever loves God must love others also. All right, there's the quandary. If love is a feeling, how can it be commanded? Because as a feeling, how do you control your feelings? I mean, feelings kind of come and go, and and it's hard to really, get a grasp on. It'd be kind of like along the lines of taking your kids to Worlds of Fun and paying the expensive ticket price and everything to go there, and then to have your kids just for whatever reason not wanting to be there, and you stare them in the face and you say, "You're going to have fun today." How do you command that? How do you command an emotion? We had something as I was thinking, and I've never done the telling a kid to have fun in an amusement park sort of thing before. But I did have something that occurred to me that I did do many years ago. This, in fact, was way back in the time when we probably were sending out our very last of any Christmas cards. We don't do Christmas cards, but we did early in our marriage. And we were wanting to put a picture in the Christmas card, and this was when my boys were young. And so we had them sitting on the fireplace, and Colette and our dog, and of course this was before digital cameras. So I had my 35 millimeter camera, which had a timer on it, set up on a tripod, and had everybody positioned and framed just right in the lens of the camera. And so then I put the timer on. It was like 8 seconds or 8 beeps or something or other, and it gives me just enough time to circle around the camera and to sit in the picture and say, okay, everybody smile, sort of thing. Well, for whatever reason, this particular day, the boys had absolutely no interest in posing for a picture. You ever have that problem with your kids when you're trying to stage a picture? And they just were not interested in it. And so they were fighting it all the time. And even though, I wasn't able to see what the picture actually was, it was pretty telling, what it was, because their mood was anything but positive. And so they were fighting me every step of the way. And finally, I was getting so frustrated with this. And we were kind of at a deadline, because I think we had taken pictures earlier and they all turned out bad. So we were trying to do this real quick to get these cards out while we still had time. And finally, it got to the point where I was standing in front of the boys, and they're fighting it, and they're kind of teary-eyed and all this stuff because they don't want to be doing this. And I'm like, come on, guys, we're going to be happy. Let's be a happy family in this picture. And, and so I said, all right, one more time. And then I set the timer, and I rushed around, and I said, okay, everybody smile. And about that time, I hear one of them sobbing. It's just like, oh. So maybe that is why we quit sending out Christmas cards, because it was just like, what are we doing? What are we doing with all of this? How do you command an emotion? I mean, how do you control an emotion? You see, he's making it very clear. You don't even need to understand, the Greek sentence structure to know that that's a command, because he states it as such. The command that Christ has given us. Whoever loves God must also love others. The focus there isn't on emotion. It is the word agape love. You say, well, yeah, but if you're talking about a special relationship like a marriage, then that's where it's talking about emotion. Now, wait a minute before you do that. You look in passages like Colossians 3:19, and this is stated in the imperative tense. Husbands, love your wives. It's using the word agape. It's not first and foremost talking about emotion. And like I've said before, it's not that agape can't include emotion, because it can, but it's not the foundation of this love. Here's a real interesting passage. Titus chapter 2, verses 4 and 5 says, older women must train the younger women to love their husbands and their children. Isn't that interesting? Older women train the younger women to love their kids. I mean, that just seems odd, especially if you're thinking about it as love is just being an emotional sort of thing. See, it's talking about more than that, way more than just some type of a feeling. And that's why it sounds strange to us when we look at that, because normally, like Webster's dictionary, our first understanding of love is something you feel. Now, this message today is not focused on marriage, okay? I've referenced that briefly, and it's not focused on marriage, but yet I want to carry that thought for just a moment as it does pertain to marriage, because I don't really have a message in this series that is just rifling in on marriage. Typically, when a couple is struggling in their marriage and they're starting to use the D word, divorce, because things have gone south, typically you're going to hear one of them, if not both of them, somewhere along the line say something like this: we just don't feel anything for one another anymore. Would you agree with that? If you have a couple that, and some of you, all you got to do maybe is look in your own past, and you can see this. For others of you, you think about someone in your family or a close friend or something. But you have a husband and a wife, and their relationship has gone south, and then eventually you start hearing one of them make a comment like this: we just don't feel anything for one another anymore. And they're kind of using that as part of the basis that, we're not compatible or whatever. There's nothing holding us together in our relationship. Here's my take on that, based on passages like the one we looked at in Colossians 3 real briefly a moment ago, where it uses the word agape as it pertains to marriage. When your feelings in your marriage, when your feelings struggle, that is not the time to throw in the towel. That's the time, if anything, to pick up the pace as love is concerned. That's the time to pick up the pace. Then more than ever, it's important that love takes the lead. You see, if anything, you need to turn up the volume of your love. And I'm not talking about an emotion. I'm talking about everything else that this word agape that we've already talked about in the series and what we're about to talk about here today. It's at times like that you need to turn the volume up on your love. And what you very well may discover, which many other couples before you have discovered, is that when you turn the volume of your love up, it starts rekindling the coals of your feelings for one another. Many have discovered that to be the case. And so it's not time to throw the towel in. It's time to turn the volume up on your love and be even more loving than what you have been. Let's take a look at perhaps the very best description of love that has ever been given. It's found in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. This is what is referred to usually as being the love chapter, 1 Corinthians chapter 13. It's interesting, the bookends on the chapter starts off with talking about how incredibly important this is. It starts the chapter that way, and it ends the chapter that way. The opening verses of the chapter say things like this: if I speak human or angelic languages, but do not have love, I am a sounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so that I can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I donate all my goods to feed the poor, and if I give my body in order to boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. You see, Paul starts the chapter off saying, you could do some really incredible things, but if it's not love that is driving all that, what do you really have? It's hollow. And then at the very end of the chapter, we have this statement: now these three remain, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. I think we would all agree, as being Christians, faith and hope, those are really important things in our relationship with God, faith and hope. But right there, Paul says, these three remain, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of those three, it's love. So at the beginning of the chapter, the end of the chapter, actually all the way through the chapter, it's promoting the importance of what this word represents, love. Most people who read this passage focus on the poetry of it, but in the process, they fail to see the practical message. Might we see the practical message? Here's these 4 verses. By the way, this is your memory work. 4 verses. They're short verses. And it not only will be your memory work today, but next week as well, next Sunday's message, I will have this same passage. So you basically have 2 weeks to memorize these 4 short verses. And just remember it this way: the most significant definition of love that's been given is right here. Here's the way it reads: love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it is not rude, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres. 4 verses. Yet these 4 verses are jam-packed with 15 individual portraits of love. 15 phrases in the middle of these 4 short verses. Paul is using 15 verbs with love as the subject. And so if you really want to develop a well-rounded understanding of what real love, true love, as we're calling it in this series, if you want to develop a good understanding of what true love really looks like, you need to wrap your mind around the 15 statements that are found in these 4 verses. In fact, part of what I did in preparation is for this message is I went ahead and took this same passage. That's the New International Version that's on the screen right now. But I went and looked at, a dozen, 15 other translations just to see what phrases, maybe slightly different phrases, were used for these 15 different descriptions of love. And so, keeping them in the same order that they're found in right there, I've created a new list. These are all the same things, just worded slightly differently. Love has a long fuse. Love is kind. Love isn't jealous. Love doesn't sing its own praises. Love doesn't have a swelled head. Love isn't ill-mannered. Love doesn't demand its own way. Love isn't irritable or touchy. Love doesn't keep a record of wrongs. Love finds no joy in evil. Love takes pleasure in the truth. Love never gives up. It always trusts. It always looks for the best. It always perseveres. 15 individual descriptions of love. The thing that you discover as you look at this, though, are a couple of things. They're all kind of interconnected. They all build on one another. And maybe as I touch on a few of them, you'll understand that better here in a moment. But one of the key things that I want you to get as you're looking at this particular passage of Scripture in 1 Corinthians 13 is that all of these characteristics of love are directed toward the well-being of the one being loved. Not the well-being of the one doing the loving. All 15 of these characteristics are directed toward the benefit of the one being loved. I think that's an important thing to remember. Because when you're talking about agape love is always others-oriented. It is never me-oriented. Okay? It's never focused on myself. It's always focused on others. Always. And you see that in this passage pretty clearly. And that's pretty significant in more than one way. For example, just to develop a little bit appreciation regarding what Paul is trying to accomplish by writing this in the book of 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians, these 2 letters in your New Testament, were written to the church in Corinth. Okay? Now, Corinth was one of the largest cities of Greece. It had been one of the most important cities of Greece since about the 8th century BC. So it was a prominent city for hundreds and hundreds of years. However, it was destroyed by the Romans in 146 BC. And it just kind of limped along after it had been destroyed for 100 years. But then there was a guy that maybe you've heard his name before, Julius Caesar, in about 44 BC, who rebuilt the city of Corinth. And he definitely was motivated in rebuilding it because this city, this ancient city, and the ruins of this ancient city, it sat on 2 harbors. And it made it a real prominent and important stop on the Mediterranean trade route because it helped create excellent connections and access both to Asia and to Italy. And so it was a major place on a trade route where there would be hustling and bustling activity and all this. And Julius Caesar, he saw that. And he wanted to capitalize on that. And so 44 BC, he basically rebuilt Corinth. Now, along with what Corinth included, besides all the trade and all of the commerce and all of the tourism and all of this, it also was pretty well known for some of the temples that were there, not the least of which is the temple of Aphrodite. Even the ruins of the temple of Aphrodite are still up on the hill overlooking Corinth to this day. Now, Aphrodite is the goddess of love. And according to the way that worship and everything in the temple was concerned, they would have like 1,000 or more priestesses there serving. Another word to use for them would be prostitutes. This was the means that you approached worship when it came to Aphrodite, this false god, is they taught that sexual love with the female priests that were there, that sexual love was the way of truth, and it was the way of honoring this god. And so being on a major trade route, being in an area where there's lots of tourism, and that particular thing was very well known in the area. It wasn't the only temple. There were several others, one of which was the temple of Dionysus, and this was the Greek god of wine and intoxication. I don't really need to tell you about any of the other temples that were there, just those two alone. You can imagine the kind of influence they would have there, and not just the kind of influence, but the fact that there were two harbors there, major trade route, so you would have sailors who had spent weeks or even months out at sea, and this is where they would come and spend a few days. So you can visualize pretty well what Corinth was like and the kind of reputation that Corinth had. And now understand that when Paul had started a church in Corinth, it was the people that made up this church that this was their backdrop. This was their background. This was the environment that they had been born and raised in. And now they were converts to Christianity, converts to Jesus. But you see, Paul fully understood that they had some bogus concepts of what real love looks like. And so that's why in this letter, 1 Corinthians, he wanted to correct that. He wanted to help them to develop an understanding of what true love really looks like, because it's not based on the notions of what you've been exposed to over the years. And that's why 1 Corinthians contains what it contains. We don't have enough time to go through all 15 of these characteristics of true love, but I do want to touch on a handful of them. So the first one is right toward the front of the list in 1 Corinthians 13, verse 4, and that is that love is patient. I want to say something about this word patient. You know, I pointed out 2 Sundays ago that the Greek language is a little more detailed in some respects than what English is. And what I was talking about on that Sunday was the word love. And I gave 4 different Greek words that are all translated by the one English word love. But they don't all refer to the same thing. Well, that same sort of thing is true regarding the word patience. There's multiple words in the Greek that can be used in reference to patience, but this particular word that is used in verse 4 of our text is a word that is exclusively used in reference to people, not circumstances. You know, so what this verse isn't saying is it isn't saying that, well, love is being patient when you live in Buffalo, New York, you know, this past week. And you have to contend with the circumstances of having whatever they ended up with, 7 or 8 feet of snow, you know, being dumped on you in just a matter of a few days. Or maybe if your transmission starts slipping on your car and it's just like, okay, don't blow up, you know, just kind of, I just need to keep my composure. And this isn't the word that would be used in reference to that kind of patience. It would be an entirely different Greek word if you were just talking about being patient with circumstances. Now, on the other hand, let's say your coworker is somebody that knows how to push your buttons, somebody who gets under your skin, somebody that just grates on you the way she is or the way that he is. This is exactly the word that you would use in regards to that when you're talking about people. For some of you, you're gearing up right now for having someone come to your house, maybe Wednesday or Thursday, and they're going to spend a couple of nights at your house, and you're going to need a whole lot of this, you know, when they come to your house. Because this particular person, it's hard to love them up close. It's fine when they live 2 states away, but when they come and they're living in the same house, It's just like about all you can take. Yeah, some of you, maybe you're going to be encountering that. I had one guy that was in our first service this morning. He said, yep, we've got 35 people coming to our house to spend the night. And I'm just like, wow, the odds of there being a couple of people that are going to rub on you has greatly increased for that guy. So this kind of patience is exactly what is needed. The word literally means, the literal rendering of the word, it means long-tempered. You've heard the phrase before about someone that flies off the handle quickly. We refer to people like that as having a short fuse, right? Well, this word basically is saying you have a long fuse. It carries with it the idea of self-restraint. This person, they may get on the nerves of everyone else, and everyone else just kind of loses it and can't take it anymore. But the person with this agape love, they're able to endure it a whole lot longer, because love is what makes them able to do that. Now let's look at another characteristic of love, and this is where you're going to see things kind of build on one another. The second thing I want to talk about is how love is kind. That's the word used in most translations. Love is kind. In a lot of ways, this is the flip side of patience. I don't mean it's the opposite of patience, but think of it this way. Patience endures the shortcomings and the headaches that are brought on by others. Okay? That's what patience does. It endures the headaches and all brought on by others, while kindness takes the initiative to reach out and help them. See how it works? Hand in hand, interlocked. And that's what you're going to see as you go down through all four verses. Everything is kind of building on one another, and then it completes the picture, and you have a well-rounded understanding of what love looks like. But yeah, when you're talking about love being kind, that means it helps. It reaches out. It initiates acts of kindness to other people. Now, unfortunately, most people are too self-absorbed in their own affairs to take time to be kind with others. Jesus told a parable that illustrated this real well. And in fact, he was talking about the subject of love. He used the word agape in understanding loving your neighbor. It's the word agape, your neighbor. And they're just like, wondering, okay, well, what exactly does that look like? And so then he tells the story of the Good Samaritan. Remember how that goes. The guy's traveling down the road. Some bandits jump out from their hidden places, and they beat him and they steal all that he's worth. And he's left lying there in the ditch, bleeding. And a couple of guys come walking by, each in turn, a priest and a Levite. Now, we're not given details in the text of Jesus' story as to what their deal was, but, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they were late for dinner, and they had been late a couple of nights earlier, and they didn't want to get their wife upset a third night in a row. And so their focus was on getting home at time, in time. Maybe they had put in double duty at the temple. Someone else had been sick, so they worked two time periods back to back. And so they were just totally exhausted and needed to get home. We don't know. But what we do know is that they were more focused in their own affairs than they were the guy who was bleeding, laying there in the ditch. So the text literally says, as Jesus told that parable, that they went to the other edge of the road and just walked on by. But when the third guy came, what did he do? He stopped. He crawled down in the ditch. He bandaged the guy's wounds. He put the guy on his donkey, took him to the nearest village, checked him into an inn, and nursed him a little bit, but then he had to continue on in his travels. But he told the innkeeper, he said, here's some money to cover this guy's expense, and if he racks up additional bills, I'll be coming back through these parts again, and I'll make up the difference for that as well. Now, why did the guy do that? Was he related to him? Did he know him? No, this guy was a Samaritan. He was from a completely different area. He didn't live in this guy's neighborhood. He didn't know this guy. But yet it was love that motivated him to reach out and to do good. to help this person at their point of need, even though he didn't know him. But he initiated that. Whereas the priest and the Levite, they didn't do that. But that's a great illustration of this particular aspect of the word agape, love. Just think of the story of the Good Samaritan. Unfortunately, for some, maybe who do decide to do something kind, they do it because of motives that there's something in it for them. They will help someone else if there's something they get out of it. And that's unfortunate, and that is certainly not what this word is talking about in our text. This is talking about kindness with no strings attached. Okay? That's what true love looks like. That you reach out and you help people at their point of need, and you don't expect anything in return. You don't even require a thank you as a result. You're going to do it because you're motivated to do it because you love them. All right? That's a picture, a snapshot of true love. Now, here's another thing that's found in our text. Love is not conceited. The word literally means puffed up. This particular Greek word means puffed up. The idea is that a puffed up person is someone who is full of himself. He has an overinflated opinion of his own importance. And on that basis, he assumes that his happiness, his opinions, his feelings really count for something, whereas other people's really don't count for something. His are what matter, what his feelings are and his opinions. Puffed up people find it easy to dismiss the needs and the feelings of other people around them. In fact, they not only look down upon others around them oftentimes, but they wouldn't hesitate to use other people as stepping stones to get to where they want to go. But not the person with true love. The person with true love would never do that to other people, would never use people as stepping stones. A person with true love, their focus isn't primarily on what they feel and what they think and what their opinion is. Their focus is on others. That's why we say others-oriented. That's what agape love is. It's always others-oriented. And so in this case, they don't focus on themselves. They focus on others. They value people. And it doesn't matter what race they are. Doesn't matter what side of the tracks they grew up on or live in presently. It doesn't matter how much education they have or maybe don't have. Stuff like that doesn't even play into it. Not true love. It doesn't even factor into it. Okay? So true love is not conceited. Number 4, true love is not irritable and touchy. Now, in the New International Version, that I had up there initially on the screen, the phrase that it used there is it is not easily provoked. Okay? But this is what it means, irritable and touchy. This is talking about someone who has a sharpness of spirit, someone who at the drop of a hat, will experience some kind of an emotional outburst. At the drop of a hat, their annoyance and irritation will be triggered, and it'll be triggered in their actions and their words and their huffy puffiness and all this kind of stuff. It's almost like a person that is irritable and touchy, as the term that's used here in the sentence. A person like this, it's almost like they're ready to fight in a moment's notice. If someone around them just says the wrong thing, it serves as a trigger, and boom, they're off to the races. And they'll state their opinion, and they'll jump the case of this other person. We all know what people like that are like. We've all been around people like that. And maybe that's, part of the reason there's a bit of a cloud over holidays like Thanksgiving, because there's someone that's coming to your house that's like that. And you feel like, what's the phrase we use? You feel like you're always walking around on eggshells around them. Because the slightest thing, the slightest comment, that happens, or the kids doing this or behaving that way, you know it's just going to set them off. And then you're going to experience grief as a result of it because of the way they'll act and some of the things that they'll see. You know, it's easy to see that in other people, that tendency. It's not quite as easy to see it in yourself. But in a crowd this size, statistically, there's probably some people in here that I've just described. You know, and that's the way you can be when you get into the presence of others. Other people feel, whether it be at work or whether it be in your home or whatever, people feel like they're walking on eggshells around you. You don't want to be that kind of person. But the reason that you're kind of operating that way is that true love really hasn't gotten a grip in your life, on your heart. Because true love will help you to get beyond that. You see, a truly loving person puts other people around them at ease, helps other people to be able to be themselves, that they don't have to, be careful about every little comment that comes out of their mouth or what the kids might do, as they run in the room or whatever. Because they can be at ease because they know you're going to cut them some slack. That's love. That's true love, is when you put people at ease around you. That's not saying that you've got to agree with everything, that the people that you're going to have over your house this week or something. It doesn't mean you've got to approve of anything and everything that they say and all of that. But that you're going to cut them some slack, and you're not going to jump their case about every little thing that happens. See, that's an evidence of true love. And now, number 5, and I definitely wanted to hit on this one. True love keeps no record of wrongs. No record of wrongs. Paul uses, it's interesting here, he uses the normal word for bookkeeping in this phrase. So for any accountants or CPAs that we've got here today, it's your word that Paul is using here. He's saying that real love doesn't keep a record of wrongs. And he's using that bookkeeping. Doesn't keep the books. The idea of keeping a ledger of every time that you've been wronged by someone, every time that a crime has been committed against you, you're logging it, you're keeping a record of it, and you're not soon forgetting it. See, that's not the way true love operates. It doesn't behave that way. Instead, you could actually say that true love is forgetful. I mean, that's not the exact way the sentence is structured, but, that's kind of the spirit of what is being said here, is that true love is forgetful. Generally speaking, forgetfulness is something that we try to avoid. Most people consider forgetfulness to be a kind of a curse of old age, right? I mean, we hate it as we get older, and we start becoming more and more forgetful about things. Reminds me of a story of a husband and wife that had been married for a long, long time, and they were in their 80s now. And they went for a doctor's visit, and as they were being checked out by the doctor and everything, they complained to the doctor about their memories, saying, it just seems like we're forgetting stuff so frequently nowadays. And the doctor, after checking them out and everything, shared with them, he said, you guys are in excellent health. I don't see any problems here. Now, in regards to your forgetfulness, I could see how that could be a frustration. So here's my suggestion to you. That when you're doing something, when you decide to do something, you write it down. Put it on a piece of paper, stick it in your pocket, and that way when you start forgetting, you can pull that out and you can be reminded. So he's just giving them a little tidbit of advice so they could kind of deal with their tendency of being forgetful. Well, later that night, they went home and they were watching TV. And a commercial came on, and so the old man got up from his chair and he started taking a step or two in the direction of the kitchen. And his wife said, "Where are you going?" He goes, "Oh, I'm going to go to the kitchen and get something to drink." And she said, "Well, while you're in there, could you get me a piece of cake?" and bring me a piece of cake from the kitchen. And he goes, oh, okay. And he takes another step, and she said, do you remember what the doctor told us today? You should be writing this down, because otherwise you're going to get in the kitchen and you're going to forget what I just told you. He goes, I'm not going to forget what you just told me. You want a piece of cake. And so he takes another step toward the kitchen, and she goes, yeah, but that's not all I want. I want some strawberries on the cake as well. And he's like, all right, you want strawberries. And she goes, you're not writing this down? Come on now, I've just doubled the order. I want cake and I want some strawberries on it. And he goes, I'm not going to forget. Cake and strawberries. He takes another step, and she goes, you're not listening to me. There's something else I want. I want some whipped topping on it as well. And he goes, all right, whipped topping. And then he takes a couple more steps toward the kitchen. She says, now come on. I've told you so many things now. There is absolutely no way you're going to remember all that. You know that. I know that. You need to write it down. And by this point in time, he's getting irritated with all of this. He goes, I am not writing this down. You want cake, you strawberries, and whipped topping. And with that, he huffed, and he went on into the kitchen. And he was gone for about 30 minutes. And then after about 30 minutes, he comes walking out of the kitchen, and he walked right up to her chair with a plate of bacon and eggs. And he handed it to her. And as she was taking the plate of bacon and eggs, she stared at it for a bit, and she goes, well, where's my toast? It's funny to a lot of us, but there's a few of us in here that are kind of laughing because it's funny, but we're crying because it's like, man, that's my story, you know? Yeah, forgetfulness. Yeah, we see forgetfulness as kind of being a curse of old age. And honestly, there's a bunch of us in here. I mean, we've all been there. We've gotten up and we've walked into the other room, and then for the life of us, we can't remember, why did I just come in here? You know, some of you maybe have found yourself on the landing, you know, on the staircase, and then you can't remember, were you on your way up or your way down, you know? And, you know, so it is kind of a curse of old age, and so normally we don't speak of it in positive ways, but the reality of the matter is that when you're talking about true love, this is one of the traits, this is one of the characteristics of true love, is that we're forgetful of the things that people do against us, the way people have hurt us in the past or offended us. You see, Paul says true love doesn't keep score. It doesn't keep a record of other people's wrongs. Now, how is it that we sometimes tend to keep score? It's not by literally writing stuff down in a book. At least I hope that's not the case. Anyone in here is keeping a written record of every time you've been wronged. If not, you need to call Brad Fogo for some counseling, okay? But how is it that we keep a record of wrongs? We keep a record of wrongs by replaying it in our mind and keeping it fresh in our mind. We keep a record of wrongs by telling other people about what so-and-so did. Those are the types of ways that people keep a record of wrongs. Quit replaying those videos in your mind. Quit talking about it the way you've been wronged by so-and-so, okay? Quit keeping a record of wrongs. There was a guy, old story, you've probably heard this, a guy that got rabies. And this was back before there was a cure for rabies that had come out. And so he was taken to the hospital because he had been bit. And the doctor checked him out and everything. And after running some tests, he broke the bad news to him. And he said, I'm sorry to tell you, you have contracted rabies and there really isn't any hope for you. However, we can keep you comfortable during your last days. What I would suggest for you to do is I would suggest for you to write out your will and set your affairs in order. And so the man said, well, do you have some paper? I would need some paper. And the doctor said, sure, my nurse will set you right up with that. And so as the doctor left to continue his rounds, the nurse brought in, a stack of paper and a pen, and the guy sat down and he started writing. And then it was quite a bit later, as the doctor was making his rounds, he stopped back by this guy's room, poked his head in the doorway, and he was happy to see that the guy was still writing after all this time. And so he went ahead and stepped into his room, and he said, I'm glad you took my advice. It's good to see that you're working on your will. And the man looked up and said, will? This isn't my will. This is a list of people I'm going to bite before I die. That is not true love, okay? That is not true love. Our ushers are going to be getting up at this time and preparing for communion. And I just want to remind you, in fact, maybe it would even be helpful to keep your Bible open on your lap to 1 Corinthians chapter 13 so you can read back over carefully, prayerfully, verses 4, 5, 6, and 7. And look at it and pray over it, understanding this is what true love looks like. It's not some abstract concept, but it's something that is very real, very tangible. Usually this particular passage seems to be reserved for weddings and anniversary celebrations and stuff like that, but that was never its original intent. This describes a person who possesses true love. This is the way they go about living their life. A person with true love. This is the description. It's Paul's intended description of a Christian. And so what I want to encourage you to do is take a look at that and then take a look at your life. Is that describing your life? God wants it to. He wants you to not only experience and to receive His love, but He wants you to reflect that love to everyone that you come into contact with. Let's pray. Father, we are thankful for the opportunity to broaden our understanding of your love and how incredible your love is and how sacrificial your love is, how your love is always others-oriented, how your love always seems to take the initiative. And Father, may our gratitude be shown in more ways than just a prayer, and in more ways than just singing a song about your love. But might our true gratitude be reflected in how we treat other people. As we have been loved by you, might we in turn love others. Father, I know that's a command in the Bible, but I pray that you would stir within us and help stir up the want to on our part, where we understand we have that as an opportunity of reflecting your love into our families, into our workplaces, and into our world. And as we do that, Lord, might you be glorified.